So today I want to talk about Baromagnes. I don't know, I feel like talking about him, and I've been complaining a lot on Twitter, and I feel like I might as well make this into a video somehow. A couple of things that I want to go over, for example, the thought that Baromagnes is just no longer viable or good, or he just sucks, he's doo-doo water, he's 69, 70,000th tier, is kind of inaccurate. I think Baromagnes was still solid, was still a viable deck up until set 10 dropped. Set 10 did a lot of damage to Baromagnes in that one, he didn't get any support. Didn't get any real support in set 9. All we got was Freynadio, which was, you know, an okay tech option, but nothing that really propelled the deck further. And the deck itself has been in this spot where mechanically it was still strong. You know, board wiping your opponent is almost always going to be very strong, very good in Vanguard. Having a Vanguard that can swing in with a crit and plus 10k power is very good. 5 attacks, very good, right? Most of these things are pretty good, and it is what most of the decks now can actually kind of do. And that's kind of the thing that makes Baromagnes not as good right now, or at least one of the things, right? Because there is, for example, Gandiva, that basically does everything that Baro can do to an extent, just better, right? Board wipe, Gandiva can do that, but actually plus from it, and also not give your opponent resources from doing so. 5 attacks, Gandiva can do that. It costs more counterblast, but it is way easier to set up. On top of all of that, it also gets a crit relatively easy just from playing, you know, and doing its thing. And it gets rewarded for this, which is the main thing. And that is, I think, the hugest thing that lets Baro down, is that he doesn't get rewarded enough for the payoff of having 15 cards in Soul. Gandiva can very easily retire 50 cards on your opponent's board and draw 50 cards. Baro can put in 50 cards into the Soul and just deck out, right? There's just not enough of a payoff for doing all of this. Whereas, you know, all these other decks get way bigger payoffs. Willistum, you know, having to play a gem every single turn, huge payoff, able to draw massive amounts of cards, get big numbers to attack with, 5 attacks, right? Able to easily search out Personalize, massive consistency. Eva has just been the queen of consistency for a long time. Very easy payoff, very easy to activate the condition of having the 3 orders, massive payoff, and having huge columns with crits, as well as, you know, defensives, grade 3s that you can use to guard, so on and so forth. Baro, for having 15 cards in Soul, the biggest payoff you get is having Lilac Rusher be able to hit for big numbers, and then that is it. There's just really nothing else, other than the obvious of being able to use Baromagnes' skill to, you know, suck everything into Soul, draw a card once per turn, and swing with a crit, which is okay, but when that's the only payoff you get, it's kind of not worth it, because Gandiva, for example, can retire the whole board, and then consistently, for the rest of the game, as long as he has those cards bound, everything in the front row gets huge, massive power. Whereas Baromagnes, you only give power after you call stuff out from Soul. So after you do your first big 15 Soul turn, afterwards you just do nothing, which is, you know, what I talked about in my previous deck profile, and, you know, with that build I try to mitigate that, whatever, it doesn't matter. So that's one of the big issues right now, and it's not up until set 9 that they became more apparent, because a lot of the decks now can just draw way more cards. Before, it was kind of just like Chronojet that can draw cards, Eva late game can draw a bunch of stuff, right, or not even draw, just get a lot of key pieces to guard, so on and so forth. Not so many decks were able to just draw as much cards as they can now. You know, we have Messiah, we still have Chronojet, we still have Eva, now we have Volista, we have Gandiva, even Hexorb can draw a good amount of cards. That is one of the biggest issues that makes Baromagnes not able to go off. Because up until, you know, before set 10, you were still able to get a benefit from the board wipe. There was a lot of decks that did not like the board wipe, and, you know, as a testament to that, that's why Gandiva is so strong, right? Because everyone wants to have something on board. Baro and Gandiva get rid of them. And, you know, now everyone has been giving the tools to sort of compete with that to an extent, in that they're able to just amass more of a hand. Lukier can even have a hand right now, which is kind of depressing that, you know, Baro cannot. And, you know, even just some of the decks being able to play the cycle cards that let you discard and for ride, Soul Blast, and draw a card, that's still something, right? That's still a form of plussing. Whereas Baromagnes doesn't even have access to that. You can't even do that because that is just the opposite of what you want to do. You don't want to Soul Blast, and that hurts a lot. So I think Baromagnes was, in a really good spot, of course, set 4, when we got our huge pieces in Swirler and Hydragrum, all that jazz, and then slowly stopped getting support. We got a Mandine set 6, and then we got Lasher with some other cards that we don't play, and then, set 8, nothing, set 9, 1 card, set 10, 0 things that we can use, set 11, 0 things yet again. So a lot of people have been bringing up the alleged concern for Baromagnes and Baromagnes players, touting that they need a brand new form, to revitalize the deck. And a lot of people have been mentioning that, Baromagnes needs to get a mask. And I myself have both jokingly and somewhat seriously asked for a Baromagnes mask, because I felt like that would be a good way to propel the deck forward. However, having actually played the new mask decks and seeing how some of the other ones are handled, I do not want a mask for Baromagnes. That is possibly the worst idea. And I'm planning on doing another video on this at some point, but my biggest issue with the masks themselves, or the mask decks, is the fact that it is in order. This works exceptionally well for Zorga, which is the first deck that they showed to be a mask deck, because that deck focuses around orders. However, many other decks either need to play orders, or orders don't work well in their deck or in their card pool, right? So the fact that they lock the mask to being the same exact thing for every single mask deck, I think is such a huge bad idea. They should have been a lot more flexible with the mask, if sometimes the mask was like a rear guard, or they just had different types of masks, or like some kind of flexibility. Because right now, having to play a grade 3 order that just has the skill to look at top 5 to search for a card that lets you Soul Blast 2 to call something up from your soul, Counterblast to get a marker, a card that lets you Counterblast to get a marker, and then Counterblast Soul Blast to get the mask, and then just the mask itself, the Baromagnes unit mask, is no good, right? That sucks. You don't want to Soul Blast in Baromagnes. You don't want to Counterblast so early on. We can countercharge, but we have an issue with Counterblast because everything wants us to Counterblast and discard cards. Then there's the fact that Baromagnes puts everything into Soul, so you'll more likely not see that mask, which really sucks, because it'll just be in Soul, you won't be able to activate it. You can't even activate it from drop because it might be in your Soul. So you will probably have to play the Mask Searcher in order to get it, which means that you'll have to take more Counterblast because you can't countercharge until you hit 10 Soul, so on and so forth. So that's tragic. Then there's the mask itself, right? You have to play the Baromagnes itself. And that means that, regardless of how many copies of the actual mask of Hydragrum or whatever the fuck it's called, regardless of how many copies of that you play, and how many copies of the Mask Searcher you play, you still have to presumably play 4 copies of the mask itself. That is not very good, because as you know for a very long time, possibly, maybe not, Baromagnes doesn't even like to play Persona Rides, because they're dead cards. They don't get you 15 cards in Soul. They're good if you get them, but you don't want to play max copies of Persona Rides, because that's dead cards that will be in your hand that don't Soul Charge, that can be, replaced with something else. So now you're telling me that I will have to do that at max copies 4 instead of just 3. Now I have to play 4 copies of a dead card plus other dead cards that do not give me Soul. Oh, but when you activate the mask, you put the mask into Soul and then you ride. That's 2 Soul. No. Putting aside the fact that isn't a Soul Charge, so it doesn't help out with like Swirler and some of your other effects that Soul Charge, like Mandem. Putting that aside, that really does not help, because one, presumably, this new Baromagnes mask would have to contain the original name of the old Baromagnes, because of the fact that we have cards like Keeney Ludley and Curtis, which are extremely important to the deck, which will now be turned off. So we have no way to very easily Soul Charge, and then no way to put cards back into the deck to make sure we don't deck out. That is tragic. Then there's the fact that you have to play in order that turn. So if you use the mask to search it, you can't play any of your orders. You can't play Pandemonium Tactics, You can't play the Cage order, you can't play the Baromagnes order, or the other Baromagnes order, or other Baromagnes order, right? You can't play any of those that turn because you play the mask. So that means you have to use the mask from drop, and you really don't have any way to do that. Even though Baromagnes is a deck that, ironically, for whatever reason, every other card effect says to discard a card, that would be the only way that you would be able to do that, is to discard or discard it early, for ride, and then you can use the mask, assuming you drew it, right? Because you can't really search it in any other way. So I don't see a Baromagnes mask working out for Baromagnes at all in any way, shape, or form, and I really hope Bushiroad does not give that to Baromagnes. But then comes the question of a brand new form for Baromagnes, something like an Aquamarine Baromagnes, or like Bastion that got the new Bastion Accord, just a brand new form. That is essentially what Baromagnes need. It has to be a card that copies the name of the old Baromagnes and, doesn't do weird things to the deck where you need to play orders and all these weird contraptions. It also has to be something that you like Superior Ride from Soul or something like that. Or it just has to completely replace the original Baromagnes, similar to how I think Bastion Accord does. Because it just comes back to the whole issue of either it's going to be in your soul and there's no easy way to get it out of soul, or you're just not going to be able to see it because you just don't plus it anyway. So you'll have to have it in your starting hand or something like that, or draw into it, mulligan into it, and then that means that's a card that's not going to give you soul charge. You're not going to hit 15 soul, you're going to die, your opponent laughs at you, so on and so forth. So that's why a new form has to come out from soul somehow. I don't really know what I want for a new Baromagnes form, to be honest. I always think and say like random things, but honestly, I am both like tired of really bad Baromagnes support, like the stuff we got in or are getting in set 12. That's just ridiculously bad, because it just does nothing for the deck, right? The new grade 2, it only gets power if you have, it only has more power than Lilac Rusher if you have 6 cards in soul. Once you hit 7 cards or something like that, Lilac Rusher always scales up higher than that new grade 2. And then putting stuff into your opponent's, back into the opponent's deck instead of their soul really helps more decks than it hurts. So it's kind of a useless card that, doesn't do much for you. The other card that when she's placed, you retire her to give Baromagnes plus 10 if you have like 10 cards in soul. We never needed something like that. Like, that's a cute option to have. I'll take that at least. I won't play it, but I'll appreciate that more than the other double rare that they gave us. But I just don't know what it is that I want as a new Baromagnes. I can tell you what I want as Baromagnes support, which is obviously not the cards that we got. But another thing that's come up a lot is that a lot of people keep saying that this Baromagnes support or new Baromagnes has to reduce the cost of Baromagnes' skill of having to have 15 cards in soul, and I think that's a horrible, dumb idea. The whole thing about Baromagnes is that you're supposed to hit a certain cap of soul, and then, your effects go off, you get rewarded for that. The problem now is that you're just not getting rewarded enough to do that. Bushiroad needs to make it so that once you hit 15 soul, you get a lot of things, active for you, right? It should be like a state. You hit 15 soul, you can do actual things, right? You have cards that say, oh, if I have 10 or more cards in soul, do this, but 15 or more, oh damn, you do this now. That's what they need to do, and they need to make the payoff actually worth it, because right now it's really not, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video. If you lower that, that is not helping in any way, shape, or form, right? Because that just means that we're getting the pity award for making our mechanic, cheaper, and then still not getting the payoff that we really need, right? Because board wipe, fine. Crit, fine. Draw 1 card, fine. That's okay, but now in sets, 12, 13, it's not cutting it anymore. We need more of a payoff for putting half of our deck into our soul, using God knows how many cards to do that. So what we need for Baromagnes in terms of support is, honestly, the only way I can put it is that it has to just turn into Shorot from Premium, where you just have cards that selectively soul charge, and you can put triggers back into your deck, maybe put cards from your drop into your deck, something like that. Maybe you can pull out cards from your soul easier than just having a counterblast discard with Kargra. Those kinds of things, right? We need to actually use the soul as a resource, not by soul blasting. Stop trying to make a soul blast, that doesn't make any damn sense. No, we need to use it as like a resource, right? something where we can pull cards out, use it as a second hand, I don't know, guard from it, you know, things like that. Make the mechanic actually work. Don't just cheapen the mechanic because you're too lazy or just don't care enough to find a way to make it work. That, you know, defeats the whole purpose of coming up with this deck and gimmick and all that stuff, and then just go, never mind, this is too hard, he just now restands or something. And that's it. I don't know. There wasn't much structure or thought to this video. I've been complaining a lot on Twitter about Baromagnes. Maybe not a lot, but I've been complaining about Baromagnes on Twitter. And I see a lot of people say things about Baromagnes on Twitter. And I try not to, like, you know, say shit to them. Sometimes I know, like, you know, they've never played the deck. They say that they built it before, but they've never actually played it, right? They played against Baromagnes once and, like, lost and thought they should have won or something like that. I don't know. Maybe it's just that I spend too much time on Twitter and I follow too many Vanguard people, or I just get too many Vanguard posts. And Vanguard players are dumb sometimes, most of the times. And they just get on my nerves. But it might just be the bulk of it because I just see so much of it, right? Like, sometimes I just see a post where it's like, oh, I love Leonor. It's the best deck in the world. Me and Leonor are so happy. I'm just like, shut up. I don't care about you and Leonor. But just for no reason. Anyways, yeah, hope you guys are having a great time. Till next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Play Vanguard and have yourselves a damn good one.